Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. My name's Sanchit and I'm a psychiatry trainee in the UK.
And I'm Varun, I'm a radiology trainee in the UK.
People often think that doctors are very well paid. Even in the UK, every year the government trots out the same line about affordability being the reason why doctors can't get a pay rise, kind of hinting at that we're paid a good amount, which obviously in our very biased opinions is absolute shit.
Cuba has managed to pay its doctors $40 a month. I know!
It's not funny, it's just insane.
I appreciate the cost of living in Cuba will be very different and much lower than here or America, for example. But to put into context, doctors regularly work as taxi drivers because you earn far more being a taxi driver than you do being a doctor.
Can you imagine that being the situation in the UK? Finishing 5 years of medical school, coming out, and then getting a paycheck, it's like 40 quid a month, and you're just sucking it all off to be a taxi driver.
You might earn more being an Uber driver than an F1 though. Take Dr. Robert Mejides, for example. He was a Cuban heart surgeon performing open heart surgery at one of Cuba's premier cardiovascular institutes. For the privilege of performing open heart surgery and being a heart surgeon, he was earning $40 a month. So, how did this come about? Why is it continuing to happen? And does it lead to better healthcare for patients?
Cuba is a tiny Central American nation with roughly about 11 million as the population.
Colonized in the 1400s by the Spanish, like many Central American countries. Fast forward to 1959 and Fidel Castro is now in charge of Cuba. A polarizing and controversial figure, to say the least. He's been described by organizations such as Amnesty International as a progressive but deeply flawed leader who should be applauded for the significant progress he made in healthcare and education, but there's also the slight issue of human rights on which he wasn't so hot.
Just a slight issue. So in terms of healthcare, Castro strongly believed in universal healthcare for all of the citizens in Cuba. So as a result, he invested heavily into medical training and producing thousands of doctors, nurses, and other healthcare staff. To give some context, USA roughly has 2 physicians for every 1,000 people. The UK has roughly 5 physicians for every 1,000 people, but Cuba has a staggering 9 physicians for every 1,000 people. So you can see how much they've already produced.
It also happens to be a communist country. So the government control all healthcare. All healthcare has to be delivered through them. They train all the doctors and nurses and they employ all the doctors and nurses. Private clinics aren't allowed, so you can see why they can control the salaries. And this is why they can pay their doctors $40 a month and get away with it. So you might start thinking, well, if I was a doctor in Cuba, you know, I'd just be thinking, well, America's right there.
Yeah.
I'm pretty well trained. I could go there. So why don't the doctors just leave?
So interestingly, in Cuba, doctors are what regarded as a regulated population. That means that they need to apply for special permission to leave the country for visas and their passport and things like that.
And in fact, most doctors are not given a passport. You need to obtain a passport, and you really only get that if you apply for a medical mission or a work-related activity, in which case they'll give you a visa and a passport that lasts a certain amount of time and then expires.
In 2012, Cuba passed a law saying that it would take no longer than 5 years for one of these health professionals to obtain a passport or a visa or something they'd applied for. They said the long wait was justified because that's how long it would take to train up a new doctor to take their place.
This sounds like the Daily Mail's wet dream. They say by doing so, they're preserving a skilled workforce which will benefit the economical, technical, and social development of their country. Now, having said all that, doctors do manage to leave the country, but it's through official medical missions. You can think of it like a car lease system, but instead of a car, it's a doctor, where the Cuban government leases their doctors to other countries in exchange for payment, obviously. So countries such as Venezuela, Brazil, and even Middle Eastern countries like Qatar. In fact, doctors are Cuba's biggest export, with 50,000 Cuban doctors working across more than 67 countries worldwide.
In this system, Cuban doctors are allowed to work abroad and also earn a higher salary. So Brazil, for example, would pay $3,600 for a doctor that they're leasing from Cuba. And note that I said for a doctor, not to a doctor. This is because under these medical missions, the Cuban government actually keeps 75% of the doctor's salary. So that $3,600 a month, that's not going to the doctor. 75% of it is going straight to the government.
In fact, these medical missions nets the Cuban government $11 billion per year. That's billion with a B. Furthermore, conditions on these medical missions aren't great for doctors. A small survey of Cuban doctors who were on these medical missions, anonymized by the way, because obviously I can't imagine the Cuban government would be very happy about them talking. This survey was very revealing.
57% of people said that they had no voluntary decision about going abroad and partaking in one of these medical missions.
41% of them said their passports removed from them by a Cuban official on arrival in their host country.
A staggering 89% of people said they had no idea where they were going or where they were going to be stationed during their medical mission.
And 91% of them said they were being watched over by Cuban officials on their mission. And the same percentage said they were being asked to pass information about colleagues to Cuban officials.
Ooh. Snitches get stitches. So these doctors must be doing good for these countries like Brazil and Qatar, right?
There have been reports that Cuban officials are pressurizing the Cuban doctors to meet certain targets for treating sick people, such as a certain number of lives saved each day. This can take the form of treating healthy people and admitting them to hospital, because that will boost payments to Cuba from the host country. One report from a Cuban doctor even said they were receiving health equipment from Cuba to their host country, which was out of date. They were burying it underground and then claiming for that equipment from their host country. Crazy, isn't it?
It's crazy.
So while these doctors may be doing good in their host country, it's not necessarily the best way of doing things.
Okay, so fine, but Cuba has a load of doctors and they're making $11 billion a year on loaning out its surplus of doctors. Surely healthcare there is amazing.
Unfortunately, not necessarily. While Cuba does perform very well in certain measures such as their life expectancy, infant death rates, etc, especially for a country of its economic standing, there are some very glaring problems. The medical infrastructure, for example, is apparently crumbling. There have been reports of doctors and nurses quitting, not just because of the money, but because they can't get the equipment they need to treat patients. And this isn't entirely their fault, to be fair. There have been long-standing embargoes from America, which means they can't import certain things that they need. And giving doctors a gift when you go and seek treatment is quite common practice out there. Because the doctors are paid so little, there's often an expectation that they will receive some sort of gift to speed up the treatment or pay you extra attention, possibly provide you better treatment. For example, one Cuban lady in an article who, by the way, asked to be kept anonymous, said that when her father unfortunately developed prostate cancer, she had to pay $500 in gifts and food, which would have been a lot pricier had she been living in a bigger city such as Havana. So to summarize all this, the Cuban doctors are being asked to work in a system that requires their skills, but absolutely does not value them.
And with Cuba being a communist country with quite a marked human rights problems, there's not really much the doctors can do either. Some do defect while they're on their medical missions, but most aren't so lucky. Thanks for watching, guys. See you guys in the next video.